Hi guys, so today is the 26th of March and our tutorial today was all about balance within your layouts and compositions. So balance is really important in the design world. Having a good balance within your compositions means that your assets are spread comfortably across the whole of your canvas, so there isn't too much going on in one place, which starts to dilute the meaning of the overall piece and also means that it's uncomfortable for a viewer to look at. So if you have weighted your design too much on the left, too much on the right, or too much on the upper or lower parts of the canvas, it can start to be confusing for a viewer and also too dense on one part of the design and then while the other part looks completely empty. So you're not making the best use of your canvas. So now I'm going to show you a few pieces of design that I found online which all use balance really well in slightly different ways. Then right at the end of the video I'm going to quickly show you how I developed the design which I created during today's tutorial. So let's jump straight in with this first example of a book cover design. It's for Catcher in the Rye, which is quite a famous novel, really well known, and I particularly like this example because although it only uses a few design elements, the designer's really got the balance in the composition nicely. So while the image takes up most of the left side of the design, it's actually really well balanced with the large typographic element on the right and then the small logo right at the bottom. This just allows space for both the image and the text to be understood together because they're both equally important here within this design. If one was to be removed, the composition as a whole wouldn't make sense anymore. So this is a great example because although there is not loads of elements involved, the designer has still maintained a really good sense of balance. So it's important to remember that even when you're only working with a couple of assets, you really should keep balance in mind and it can really make or break your composition. So let's quickly move on to my next example. Now here, initially, you might not think that there has been a lot of consideration for the balance within this piece, but actually if I were to hold it in my hand and fold it this way, so it was still a portrait piece of paper, you'd be able to see that the elements on the right and the elements on the left are actually in balance. Similarly, if I were to fold it the other way, so it became more of a landscape shape, you would also see that the elements on the bottom and the elements on the top are actually completely in balance as well. So this is a great example of how even though a design looks completely random, it's actually been really well thought through and the designers spent time considering the balance of each element within the composition so that it feels comfortable for the viewer to look at. So that's another example that I really like, and again I really like this design. Personally, I love typography, so I love to see when it's being used really playfully and being experimented with. So let's move on to my next example. I included this because it's another completely different project. This is a packaging project and it's very bright and there's also a more illustrative element to it. Now, again, if I were to fold these products in half, you can see that the elements on the bottom and the top half of the canvas are fairly equal. So you have more of a fun illustration on the top with the solid title, which draws more attention. But then on the bottom, you have a complete fill colour and some smaller subtext, but more of it than on the top. So although the elements on the top and the bottom aren't exactly the same, they are actually in balance, and this is something to really remember when you're thinking about balance. It's not about making sure there's exactly the same elements on the top or the bottom or the left or the right. It's more that the importance of the elements is equally balanced throughout your design. So this is a really good example of how balance doesn't just apply to editorial projects. It also applies to packaging, it can apply to web design, it can apply to anything where you're using multiple assets. So let's move on to my final design. Now, I included this because it is a very literal representation of balance within a design composition. The text on the upper left is mirrored on the bottom right. There's a reflection of the portrait of two men, and then right in the middle of the poster there's the title, which if you got a pair of scissors and cut this design in half would literally be cut straight in half. So this is a really good example of how balance can be taken very literally but still look really good, very professional and be well thought through. That's all of my examples for today, but I wanted to quickly show you guys this design so you can see how the assets I used in the video can work in a more complex design scenario. So you probably noticed that I've introduced some more design elements to make the piece as a whole feel more polished and look like a real editorial cover design. But I've still considered where everything should sit within the design as a whole. So I didn't keep the design elements where they were and then just add a few more assets into the existing design. I actually took it apart completely and considered the balance of the overall piece, and then started adding elements back in, and then had a good play with it until I felt that the assets not only all worked together to make sure the design looked professional, but that it was nice and easy to navigate for a viewer. That's about everything for today, but I hope that you enjoyed this video and you found it useful, and hopefully I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks, bye.